This week on the Destination Angler.
We've had some warm and low water years. This is not going to be one of them. I can tell you that already. It's been butt cold and very wet, and still is. And we have a few days in the 70s coming up, but you know what? It's going to get cold again and rain. So you normally build snowpack here anyway through June. So anyway, going back to the Madison, the resource is remarkably resilient. I mean, it just amazes me how Mother Nature and the fish and the animals survive through some of these things. But they do.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. And by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. And by JP Ross Fly Rods, makers of happiness, one rod at a time. Get outside and simply fish. You can support the show by checking out these great companies, and thank you very much. Coming up on the Destination Angler, we're headed to New York State to talk dry fly fishing on the famous Upper Delaware River. Then we're headed to northern New Mexico to check out the Chama River, which is a wonderful off-the-grid hike and fishery you've probably never heard of. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode of the Destination Angler on Silver Creek in central Idaho. Hey, you like a challenge? Then come fish Silver Creek. It's a magical place with crystal clear water, cloud-like hatches, and finicky fish on an open-to-the-public 880-acre preserve. You won't want to miss these shows. Today, our destination is the famed Madison River in southwest Montana, and our guest is industry veteran and outfitter Dave Kumlien, founder of Montana Troutfitters, one of the oldest fly shops in the Bozeman area. Southwest Montana is chock full of world-class water, and the Madison River just may be the crown jewel, and for good reason. Designated a blue ribbon trout stream, the Madison has it all: large trout and high fish counts, prolific hatches, and incredible scenery, and of course, the famous 50-mile riffle. You know, you'd be hard-pressed to find a guy who's done more to protect and preserve the Madison River and fly angling in Montana. Dave has pretty much seen and done it all. He was the first president of the Fishing Outfitters Association of Montana. He was appointed to serve on the Montana Governor's River Use Study Commission and is a founding member of the Montana Coalition for Stream Access. He was a two-time president of his local TU chapter and helped found the Whirling Disease Foundation, serving as development director. After he sold his fly shop in 1998, Dave went to work for Trout Unlimited as director of their Aquatic Invasive Species Program. He also served as TU's national coordinator of their Veteran Service Partnership Program. But there's more. In 2001, Dave received the prestigious Outdoor Life Magazine Conservation Award, and just this year, he was inducted into the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame. So listen in as Dave gives us the lowdown on the Madison from top to bottom and provides a unique perspective from his nearly 50 years of guiding and fighting for anglers, guides, and the rivers we love. I did just want to say that this show was recorded end of May before the historic Yellowstone floods that affected the region. So Dave, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. I've been looking forward to this, Steve.
Yeah, I know it. And congratulations on the Hall of Fame. That just happened this year then, huh? How'd that come about?
Yeah, that was a surprise to me. So I was reading a blog post on Trout Unlimited website, and at the end of it, it was congratulating Chris Wood, the TU CEO, for being inducted into the class of 2022. And in the very last paragraph, it said, and former TU staffer Dave Kumlien is also a member of this class. That was the first time I heard it. I had no idea.
Well, why would you need to know?
Yeah, so it's kind of a tragic story. My son and some friends made the application or nomination to the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame, and the fellow who organized it on fortunately, tragically, he passed away. He sent the all the paperwork in. So the announcement, the notification that I was going to be inducted went to him. And
Oh, God.
that was tragic, like I said. But that it was an interesting way to find out. It was actually kind of cool. I called my son and said, "Do you know anything about this? Is this a joke?" And then he told the story about James and the whole bit. So anyway, it was interesting. But yeah, it is an honor being a cheesehead from Janesville, Wisconsin, and working for a year, summer and fall up there in the Namakagon by Hayward. I've been to the museum a bunch, so I know about it. So anyway, it is an honor.
Man, that is an honor. You're up there with some amazing folks, man. Good job. And now you've been out doing quite a bit of fishing already this spring. How's the fishing been? I think the last time I talked to you, you were fishing with your pastor on a very windy day.
Yeah, yeah, I have been. You know, I had a prostate cancer diagnosis and surgery in 2020, and 21 I started to heal up, and I just kind of made a vow for myself that that sort of thing sort of emphasizes one's mortality, right? So I just decided I'm going to take the time I've got. I'm retired, and I'm going to fish. So I think since the 1st of January 2022, I might have 35 days on the water, maybe 40. So I've been going a lot. Madison, Yellowstone a lot. I've been over to the Big Hole, up to the Missouri.
Nice.
Haven't fished the Gallatin yet, but I have been fishing, and it's been good. The fishing this spring, I think, has been excellent, actually. And the Mother's Day Caddis is one of the early events that's kind of fun, and I spent a lot of time on the Yellowstone, including that day with my pastor Ryan Cook, where the wind howled. But despite that, we had very good fishing. When you could find a place where you could actually fish because of the wind, we had excellent fishing, and the fish were taking dries. But that hatch is kind of come and gone, and that river has come up. So the progression of that caddis is it's now on the Madison, Upper Madison by Ennis, and over on the Big Hole.
Oh, nice. Yeah. How hard is it to hit the Mother's Day caddis? I've heard it's kind of tricky.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the dates are fairly predictable. Generally, the Yellowstone starts right at the end of April or the first few days of May. And this year, the hatch, I was on the section from below Livingston, east of Livingston, with a friend on May 4th, and the hatch exploded that day on that section of the river, and that's
nice.
About normal. Then it proceeds over to the lower Madison in about a week, say the 10th, and then it moves upstream there. It has kind of a pause as the hatch doesn't move through Ennis Lake, but the river up above takes a while to warm. And so it's about a week later on the Madison, and then about the 20-something of May, it's over on the Big Hole. So the timing is predictable. The water conditions are not. And so sometimes you get off-color water and you can't fish it, or what happens on a lot, like the Yellowstone, will go up and get off color for a few days, and then it gets cold, as it does at that time of year. Like one of the days the Yellowstone went up, that night it was like 10 degrees at Cook City. So nothing melted. Yeah, it was rain that drove it up. There was no snow melt. So as soon as that rain flushed through, the Yellowstone dropped like a rock, and it actually came back, and I had some very good fishing after the muddy water. So that's the kind of thing you have to, it's not impossible to plan a trip around it, but you have to be flexible on it. But it's a lot of fun. It's one of those heavy hatches. When the Mother's Day is going, like the first day on May 4th, there's so many bugs. They're in your ears, behind your sunglasses. And, the dog is in the boat with me, and she's snapping at them right and left, eating caddis hors d'oeuvres. It's a pretty incredible hatch. And then the caddis will mat up in these mats of caddis that are inches deep in back eddies. And it's something to see. And the fish don't always get it figured out right away. Like, on the Paradise Valley stretch that I floated one day from Carter's down to Mayor's Landing, just south of Livingston, I was with my friend, and we're out there, and there's a few caddis around, caddis here and there, and then it's like somebody flips a switch. It goes from 0 to 60 in 2.5. I mean, all of a sudden the place blows up. There are caddis everywhere, but typically the fish don't eat them right away. I mean, some do, but they're not universally on it. It took them about an hour to figure it out. So it started about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The fish here, fish there. We caught a few fish, and at 4 o'clock, it was like collectively the fish in that stretch got it figured out, and we had one of those epic, not every cast deal, but we got a lot of fish.
Darn close.
Crazy.
What do you do when you've got that many bugs on the water and you're hoping like heck they're going to take your fly? What's your strategy there?
That's a good question. It's hard because if there's that much food, they're feeding like crazy, but not like indiscriminately. Plus, the big challenge really is to find your own fly.
Right.
So I generally put on something. I stick with a caddis pattern, but I'll just give you one quick example. This friend I was fishing with, Chris Flack, he outfits out of Columbus, Montana, and guides on the Stillwater. So we had a busman's holiday. The two of us were together. So we're fishing along, and these caddis mats that make these big mats in the back eddies, they spin off what I call snakes. When there gets to be a lot of them, they'll kick off a ribbon of these, and these, like, they'll be a foot or two wide, maybe 25 feet long, and they'll be solid caddis, and they'll start floating down the river out of the back eddy. So we're floating along, and I saw one of those things, those caddis snakes, if you would, out in the river, and the fish figured it out, and they were feeding on this snake. They just move along with it, just gobble along the edges, and you can see where there's some nice fish in there. So I switched patterns. I had a Hemingway caddis, which is a really good imitation, a very close imitation, but amongst a bunch of real ones, almost impossible to find. So I took that off and I put on a Goddard, that deer hair.
Yeah.
Big, that's much more visible. And it's still a pattern that they'll take. It's not like I put on something extra big or extra weird. I just put on another caddis pattern that I knew I could find. And so we went out there, rode out in the middle of the river. We'd been fishing the bank, and those fish are feeding, and there looked to be one pretty good one in there. So I cast my Goddard in there, and sure enough, he ate it. And it ended up being, almost a 19-inch rainbow that ran all over the river like a steelhead. So it was well worth doing. But that problem is difficult to deal with when they're feeding that hard and there are that many bugs. And some people solve that by putting a pupa on below the dry fly, and they'll take the pupa readily too. So then your dry fly becomes a fly the fish can eat, but it's also your strike indicator. So you can do it that way too.
That's cool. Let's talk about the Madison for a second. So here's some words I found describing the Madison. I want to see what you think of this. Iconic, beautiful, mythical, magnificent, breathtaking, famous, stable, and predictable. So how well do you think those words describe this river? And does it still live up to its reputation?
Yeah, I mean, I think those words all apply to the Madison. It clearly is an iconic trout stream. I think if you lined 25 anglers up in any major city around the world, fly anglers, and asked them to name their favorite places, I'm pretty sure the Madison would get in that list. So it's famously year-round. It is kind of our crown jewel river amongst the Blue Ribbon trout streams. A lot of people come and fish it. It's very popular. It is wadeable. It is quite wadeable, which is not true of all of the Blue Ribbon streams. Like the Yellowstone's not really a great river to wade, but the Madison is, except at very high water, and that's an appeal to the wading anglers. It's also easy to float, relatively easy to float that river in a drift boat. It can be plenty dangerous, but it's not as dangerous, say, as the Yellowstone is, which quite often each year takes somebody's life, frankly.
Right.
That doesn't happen on the Madison so much. So that makes it more attractive. And like I say, it's in the Golden Triangle of famous trout streams. I call the triangle Henry's Fork, Last Chance, Idaho, West Yellowstone, Bozeman, probably throw Gardner in there too. It's in a famous triangle where people come and fish. So it's one that people hear about.
Right. Hey anglers, are you looking for a darn near perfect cup of coffee to start your day? Then do yourself a favor and check out anglerscoffee.com. That's right, Anglers Coffee is made by anglers for anglers, delivered to your doorstep, one batch at a time. They start with the very best coffee beans selected for their great flavor and responsible growing methods. Then each batch is roasted fresh daily, and the result is a wide selection of roast styles and coffees that will satisfy the most discerning coffee lover. And you gotta love these names: Willie's Blend, Caddis Blend, Brookie's Roast, Muddler's Blend are just a few of the deep, bold, and rich flavors you can enjoy every day. And a percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations that directly impact the fly fishing community. So head on over to anglerscoffee.com to check out their great selection of coffee and the organizations they support. And if you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. That's Anglers Coffee. It's darn near perfect. If you've ever looked for a good map to help you with anything from public access to finding the best trout streams in a given area, I highly recommend checking out this new app called Trout Routes. Just this spring, I was in the driftless region of Wisconsin, and man, was it awesome to have the Trout Routes app on my phone to help us do some exploring. Trout Routes made it so easy to find new water and access points that we never would have found without it. Trout Routes has mapped out every trout stream by state with very detailed access maps for every stream. They have over 15 different map layers with hundreds of thousands of access points. They also have local fly shops, the ability to take notes, and even local stream regulations, and you can download maps for offline use. Today, Trout Routes covers 23,000 trout streams in 23 states, including Montana, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Wyoming, Missouri, Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, West Virginia, and more. And they're adding 10 more states this year, including Utah and New York. So if you have an upcoming trip or are looking to explore nearby streams, I suggest you check out Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. Don't leave home without it. What are some of your other favorite rivers in the area, Dave?
Oh man, that's for what I would call the larger rivers. The Madison's certainly one of my favorites. I really like the Yellowstone. I love the Madison, don't get me wrong, but the Yellowstone has more varied water. I sometimes say more character, but that's not fair to the Madison. You described it earlier. The Madison from Quake Lake on down to Ennis Lake is literally the 50-mile riffle. Now, there are pools and stuff like that. There's variation. Isn't it one solid bank-to-bank riffle with no character? But the Yellowstone has a lot more river water type changes. Some big rapids, some really fast drops, some big back eddies, some riffle corners where you have a major change in river direction. So you get a riffle corner. Those are always heavily populated by trout. You don't have those in that same magnitude on the Madison. So it's the Yellowstone's probably my favorite, but to be honest with you, my favorite is whatever one I'm on. To be honest, I like them on.
Yeah.
Like I love the big hole. I've been over there quite a bit, and we'll spend quite a bit of time on the big hole because the salmon fly hatch will start over there early June, first week of June, and that's a tremendous salmon fly hatch river. So it depends what's going on.
Yeah, I hit that salmon fly hatch on the big hole years ago with my mom, who, for all your listeners, I know Dave because Dave and his Montana Troutfitters used to take my mom and dad fishing in the 90s, like for a week. And I got to come along on a trip. It was my first trip out there in 1993.
That's very cool. Yeah, we have that connection. I guided your mom and your dad quite a bit. I mean, we went many times. And along with their friends, the Morgans, and then another Toledan whatever you call them.
Yep.
Jim Finley was another friend, I believe, that
Sure.
came out as a result of that. So I had a pretty solid connection with Toledo, Ohio there for a while.
You did. Yeah, it was a number of years they go out there and just had a blast. And I ended up connecting with one of the guides that my mom and dad used when you weren't available, Rodney Campbell. I talked to him, and he was able to tell me some stories about my dad that I didn't know about. So it's been fun reconnecting.
Yeah, that has been fun. This part of our getting acquainted is fun because obviously your parents and really good friends and clients of mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, they sure enjoyed fishing with you and your whole staff there. So anyway, let's talk about the Madison a little bit. So could you kind of dial us into like where is the Madison? Where does it originate? How long is it? How does the character of the river kind of change and the fish profile change from top to bottom? Kind of dial us in from that perspective, if you could.
So the Madison starts in Yellowstone Park at the confluence of the Gibbon and the Firehole River. And the Madison in the park is, it has a pretty good gradient, and there is some faster moving water. But it's mostly known up there. It's more pool and slower moving water, and it's very popular. It has good hatches. You can't float fish in the park, so everybody wades it. In the park, Yellowstone Park is iconic too. You got the Madison River pictures and good fishing, buffalo crossing the river, bison. It's a cool place. I used to go up to the Madison in the park more. I don't so much anymore because I just don't. I used to, but I don't. I like it, but I have other places I go that are frankly a little closer.
Yeah.
So then the Madison goes down and goes into Hebgen Lake, which is a lake created by but it's a power generation and water storage. So it goes into the lake, and the lake is quite a resource itself. It offers some great trout fishing, not just for gear and troll and stuff, but Hebgen, of course, you probably heard of the famous gulpers. You can go out onto Hebgen, and not too many people use float tubes anymore, but they go out with small craft, or you can go out in a drift boat. I do that. And the gulpers are browns and rainbows that cruise around the lake and feed on the surface. So if you don't have any wind, you have gulpers on tricos, you have gulpers on calabatus, and the fish are nice sized. If you go out during a gulper period of one of those insects, you'll have cracks at fish that are 16 to 20 plus.
Nice.
And it's a great big, if the wind's not blowing, it's just a great big spring creek. And that's a challenge. So it goes through Hebgen and comes out the Hebgen Dam and then flows a short section there. I can't tell you how many miles, but just a couple, 3, down to Quake Lake, which was created by the Quake. I think the Quake was 54 or 64. I can't remember the year, but it's been a while. And the side of the mountain fell off one night and unfortunately actually buried some campers. It was a tragedy.
Yeah, I heard that.
And so it created the lake. And Quake is, if you've seen Quake, that looks like a graveyard for pine trees, because all the trees that were there that got flooded, they died. And so a lot of them are still upright, obviously without needles or anything, just their skeletons. It's kind of eerie, actually. But that lake is pretty good fishing in its own right. And then below Quake, it goes into the 100-mile riffle. It drops down, goes past that section that goes past down towards the West Fork, under the bridge to Idaho, the Reynolds Pass Bridge, and on down through all the rest of the Madison all the way to Ennis, and then hits another lake at Ennis Lake.
Yeah.
And then there's a dam below that. And that's a section of the river that a lot of people don't talk about. But the Madison north of Ennis Lake, from there down to the Missouri, is very good fishing. And most of the discussion always focuses on the river above Ennis. But to be honest with you, we fish out of Montana Troutfitters. We fish the river below the lake as much as we do above. And for me personally, given good fishing opportunities on either section, which does happen, when the upper is good and the lower is good, I'm not sure I wouldn't take the lower. And that's heresy for people that like the upper. The folks in Ennis, honestly, get a little bit funny sometimes. There's a lot of people that live there that don't pay any attention to the river below the dam. The largest trout I've ever seen caught in the Madison River that I've seen caught was caught by my son Chris at near dusk on July 3rd, 3 years ago during a brown drake hatch, and it was a legitimate 29-inch brown trout that he caught on a dry fly.
Wow. How did he get that on brown drakes? And tell us the story how he got that.
Well, I honestly didn't fish that hatch that much. If you know the brown drake, it's a relatively short duration fishing in the evening, maybe 2-3 hours right before dark. And so it doesn't get a lot of commercial fishing development because who wants to go take a 3-hour trip? I have some clients who do, but most people are looking at normal daytime hours. That's a hatch when it's on. We don't even leave Bozeman until 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And when we get out, it's 10:30 or 11. It's getting dark. You got your headlamp on so you can find your stuff. So it's a little different hatch. But anyway, it's a big buck, as you know, that brown drake must be an 8. And so in Lower Madison has a ton of them. And in fact, there was one night when it was still dead calm. There are so many of those things. You can hear them. You can literally hear them. And it's really something. So when those are on the water, that much food, I mean, all the fish in the river are eating them. So anyway, we go out there. We've been going out, and we're out there one evening. I think it was July 3rd. And I was I'll say this, I was taking a break from the river, and I was looking upstream at the confluences of the main stem and a small channel. And I saw this big fish rise. So I didn't have my rod with me. I summoned my son. I said, Christopher, come up here and take a look at this. This is a big fish. And he came up there and saw it eat a drake. And Christopher's a good angler. First cast, right on the nose. The fish eats. And I went back and got the net because I could see right away this was not going to be landed to hand.
Yeah, right.
Or he wasn't going to reach down and pick that one up. So I got our boat net, our big net, and I was the gilly. I landed the fish. He got it landed. But it is a huge brown trout. And the funny thing about it is, it was feeding right in a place where I'm sure during the day no less than 300 inner tubers had run down that channel, which is another story about the Madison and crowding. But that's the story of that fish. And there have been some big fish caught in the Madison. I've seen quite a few, but this legitimately 29-inch fish that is a massive brown trout. Yeah.
Don't suppose you got a picture of that thing, do you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You got to send that to me.
Yeah, I'll shoot you that. I didn't put that in the group because I didn't know how many grip and grins you wanted, but I'll send it.
That one might be interesting. Yeah. Well, that's a great story.
Hi, everybody. This is JP of JP Ross Fly Rod Company. We love listening to Steve and his guests, and we hear over and over again how much people love fishing small streams and the magic and tranquility that they get from being on the water on these small streams. Well, it's inspired us so much that we make fly rods for small stream fly fishing, and we've been doing it for 25 years. We make fly rods as short as 5-foot 3-weight 3-piece called our rock hopper. We make rods out of E-glass, S-glass, carbon, and carbon fiber hybrid. Check us out at jprossflyrods.com, and do me a favor, send us an email and tell us why you love fly fishing small streams so much. We'll send you a gift of a sticker pack or hat, and we'll even give you a discount code for listening to the Destination Angler podcast. We sure do appreciate your time listening to this ad. Check us out at jprossflyrods.com.
And I'm curious, so as you go from the park, you kind of describe what it's like up there. What's that upper Madison, like below, just below Quake Lake? What's that section look like? Is that super fast? What's the gradient like and the flows and whatnot?
Yeah, the gradient right there is super fast. And it's when that mountain fell in, Mother Nature the lake flow was stopped. So there wasn't anything in it for a short time. And so the Army Corps got in there and they made, and I can't remember how long it took them, but they had to get in there right away because water's building up behind the the slide pretty quick. And so, but the channel to open the flow below Quake down to the rest of the Madison is sort of industrial looking because it is. And so when it's not a real wide channel of the river, and there is a gradient there, and so the water rips through the first bit of it, and pocket water kind of fishing only, and you better be pretty nimble. You can't wade it. You just walk the rocks and dap it into the pools. Some guys do that. There are fish in there to be caught. But then below that, it comes back out into the Madison Valley, gets below the slide, and you get down into the slide in area where the river is still plenty quick, but it's more manageable. The channel widens probably 3 times coming out of the slide area. So you widen the channel, the velocity drops some. It makes it more manageable. So that's what you have. It's known as the 100-mile riffle, and that's pretty much what you have from there all the way down until you get to Varney. Varney is 8-10 miles south of Ennis. From Varney on down to the lake, the river there are a lot more channels. It's pretty much a one-channel river above, but from Varney down to the lake, there's quite a few channels.
Yeah, I saw that.
Some of them are relatively small and wadeable, and it's interesting water. So you can float fish, and there's I think, really great opportunities to stop and wade down in that stretch. And then as you go down through Ennis, below Ennis at Valley Garden, well, actually at Ennis, there is no fishing from boats allowed from Ennis to Ennis Lake. So you can use the boat as a taxi, but you have to stop and get out and fish.
Okay.
So it's done. It was originally done not to make wading anglers happy. That's a lot of people think that's why it happened, but originally it was done because there is a ton of goose nesting and waterfowl habitat in the channels from Valley Garden to Ennis Lake. That's I think that's 4 or 5 miles maybe. And so they did that to protect the hatching season, but it was kept in place after it was determined there really wasn't a need for that to help the waterfowl. I mean, God knows there's enough Canadian geese in the world, and
yeah, right.
They don't really need any more help. They're pretty vital. So it stayed that way though. And fishing from boats not allowed. Kind of a refuge for wading anglers. Somebody whose blood pressure goes up when they see a drift boat. That's a place where they can go in and have it pretty much themselves.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Dave, talk a little bit about Montana stream access laws in private and public water along the Madison.
Well, we're pretty blessed in Montana to have stream access for the public protected in our state constitution. And it's amazing that we did that at that time, because that was 1840 something, I think.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I don't know anybody was really thinking much about fishing back then, but the water in the stream bed up the ordinary high water mark belongs to the public. And I think the wording is something like it's held in trust by the state and administered for the public benefit or use or something like that. So in the 70s, I think this was, or early 80s, I'm getting old, I can't remember exactly, but there were challenges to the stream access law. And there were landowners who felt like they owned the stream bank on either side of the river, and they looked at some other states and they thought they should be able to block public use off. And that happened in a variety of places. There was a landowner over on the Beaverhead and then there was a situation on the Dearborn River, which is a trib of the Missouri, where landowners tried to block public access. And so there was an organization founded that I was actually a charter member of, called the Montana Coalition for Stream Access. And we had the law on our side in that the Constitution protected it, but it still went to court. People blocked off the river, and they had various reasons, to protect the riparian zone, to protect their livestock. And there's legitimate reasons. I think there were some people that just didn't like the public being anywhere around they were, and it just got kind of acrimonious there for a while. But it went all the way through district court, to the U.S. Supreme Court, and an Ennis lawyer named James Getz, he's a guy who grew up in Ennis, grew up in the Madison, actually argued before the Supreme Court and won.
For the anglers.
Yeah, one for the anglers. The coalition that the ordinary water and stream bed up the ordinary high water mark belongs to the public in Montana, and that was upheld. The following years, there were a few attempts in the legislature to try to undo that. All through that, the Montana Coalition for Stream Access, of which I was a member, we provided testimony, we rallied support, and so I was not popular amongst some landowners. But the interesting thing was, amongst the ranchers and farmers that knew me, and there wasn't the same issue, because the people that really knew what was going on, they knew what the Constitution said. There were some things we needed to address about how one can access the public water. You can't jump. Well, maybe you could, but you can't access over private land. It's got to be at a public access point.
Yeah.
And then once you're in the water, you got to stay in the water and stay below the ordinary high water mark.
Yeah.
And you can't get out to trespass.
So you can walk on gravel as long as that's below the ordinary high water mark, correct?
Yeah. So there's a definition to this. And like I said, I've worked on this a lot. And right now I'm teaching a course for the Fishing Outfitters Association of Montana. They have a program called Guiding for the Future, where young guides, new guides can come in and take this course a couple of days long. And I teach this ethics, guide behavior, agency relationship course. And so I've spent some time lately getting caught up on the way the department and the state looks at the law. So the definition of the high water mark is that point at which the water impresses against the soil so as to render it unsuitable for agricultural purposes. And what you described, if it's gravel and exposed rock, that's below the ordinary high water mark. You can use that. If it's grazable, if you got grass that's grazable, and I mean, you got to have grass, you just can't have a wild weed here and there growing amongst the rocks.
Right.
If it's grazable, that's an agricultural use, then you're done using it. And on some streams, that's grazable right down to the water. And so there's really no way to get out. So it depends on the stream, but that's the definition. But if you can stay within the ordinary high water mark and access at a public point, and you do not get out and trespass, you're fine. And you and I discussed just a bit ago about Wisconsin has good stream access. Montana has a great stream access. Some states don't. I think it's Colorado and Wyoming have much more restrictive stream access, and wading anglers really can't use the water down there unless it's public. So we're lucky in Montana, we're lucky in Wisconsin, where I grew up, to have those things. But that went through all the way through district court to Supreme Court, was attempted to be changed in the Montana legislature by some folks who didn't like the decision. It survived all of that, and so we have that intact today. There's still a few issues that remain about this high water mark. I think that's pretty clear. But the one thing that's not uniform is these public access points at bridges. Some of the land descriptions do not have any access from a county bridge at all built in. There's none. Others have a right-of-way access where you can use the county road right-of-way to access the river. And they're different. And you really have to know the river you're on. And so occasionally there are some rivers that people would like to fish that you can't get in from a county bridge.
You mean because the bridge physically is too high and you can't climb down there? Is that what you mean, without trespassing?
There just isn't an easement there.
Okay.
The public goes right along the roadway and then right up to the bridge piling. So there's no way for you'd have to jump from there. I think there probably have been people who have done that, but you don't. This is an area that needs definition, and it's being defined in court cases. It'll eventually get figured out, but they're all different. I personally think the solution is they need to pass a state law and just define what the right of way is at every county bridge. It's got to be at least 6 feet. So then you can get around the bridge, get in the water. But most streams you can get in, and then you have to stay in. And if you encounter a man-made impediment to stream use, like a fence. You can navigate around that fence and return to the water at your earliest convenience. So if there's a lot of the people are putting in those Z gates like they do at the not too many people putting in stiles, but a lot of people putting in those gates where you can zigzag through and keep going. In other places they don't, so you can legally get out and go over the fence, or if it's more if there's a convenient gate, you could use that, and then you got to get right back in the river. But if you encounter a natural impediment, a steep bank, fast water that's 10 feet deep on either side, you can't stay in the water. You can't get out because there's grass right down to the edge. You're done.
Oh, interesting.
And so then you got to turn around and go elsewhere. So there's some things that people need to know. A lot of people have what I call kind of a cursory understanding of stream access, and they think it applies to everywhere, all waters, all the time. But it doesn't. But it still gives us access as public anglers in Montana to literally thousands of miles of trout stream.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We got plenty to fish.
I mean, it's why I love Montana. I mean, I love fishing out west, but Montana is special for that reason. And let me ask you, Dave, because last year you had an explosion of anglers because of COVID, and you also had hoot owl restrictions, and then the Hebgen Dam gate failure. I mean, can the Madison withstand another year like that?
Well, I think it can. I think from the human perspective, last year wasn't a lot of fun. But the one thing I've learned over the years is Mother Nature is very resilient. And last year was the perfect storm of bad conditions. We had, when I say bad conditions, I say bad conditions because we had a lot of people seeking refuge from COVID and restrictive, mask regulations, blah, 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 in towns. And they came west. The border to Canada was closed. I think South American travel was restricted. So there was just, you could come to Montana, and just the nature of being here on a river in Montana, that's social distancing. It's just, it was a attractive thing. So a lot of people came out, and it was busy. I don't own my fly shop anymore, but I'm still the outfitter. And last year we ran more trips than we had ever run before. And no, you got busy, you got a lot of people. So then you combine that with the fact that while we started into the fishing season, if you would, with decent snowpack, it got hot. I don't mean warm. It got hot in June, and it just melted out everything. So we went from being in, I wouldn't say great shape, but pretty fair shape to in dire situation. Water's dropping, water's warming. And so they implement, the Fish and Game does, hoot owl restrictions, no 2 p.m. to midnight fishing. And they implemented that on a lot of the rivers, and Madison was one. What happens when that gets implemented is you take a fishing day, let's say, for an enterprising guy to get out of bed. There's people that go early, and so you got a 6 a.m. to, in the summer, land of the midnight sun out here almost. You got a 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at least fishing day. People spread themselves out, so it was artificially compressed into a early morning start, as early as you could get up. And there were a lot of people that made this change. There were people getting on the river at 5:36. But then everybody can only fish till 2, so everybody's forced into the same takeout. That was the place where it was really the worst, is that everybody had to be off by 2. And that was combined, hoot owl combined with the crowds. It's interesting. There have been a lot of outfitters and guides complain about it, and it wasn't fun. I didn't really like it either. But the fact of the matter is the fishing was actually still decent. And the beauty, the grandeur of the scenery didn't change at all. There were just a lot of people, and that bothers some people. It ruins their experience. Me, it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, I get used to it, and I know what I can do to avoid things here and there. But it made it bad, and we got a lot of publicity. There were a few people that are very vocal about this being, and some of them in writers, outdoor writers, God bless them, that this was Fishageddon and things were ruined, and that's total crap, to be honest. It was not a great year. If we had another one of those years this year, I'd be bummed. But the fishing right now this spring is excellent. And there's no indication that we've had any problems as the result of that low and warm water. Now, you wouldn't want to have that every year all the time, because that'll
Right.
eventually start to take the fish out. But so last year was not a great year in that sense, and that there were a lot of people, hot weather, but the fishing remained pretty good. And the fishing in the fall, once things settled down, hoot owls came off. The fall fishing was pretty good. The fallout from it is that we carried very low flows through the winter into this spring. And right now, as we speak, runoff has been delayed. It's been cold out here. It's been a good old-fashioned cold and wet Montana winter. So anyway, that's the long story on that. And one of the things, just quickly before we leave that, is there's a lot of people think that we're going to have another drought. I think it's human nature. Some people like to just get their hair on fire about how things are bad, and the media feeds that a little bit. So right now, I'm looking at this USDA NRCS website. I've sent you that. I sent you one picture.
I saw it.
So
yeah.
it records snow depth and other information by remote sensors placed in drainages that are fed to a satellite, which are compiled daily and put on an interactive map. It's a kid's deal. It's an interactive map by color. So dark blue is 150% of the 30-year average. Light blue is 130 to 150. 110 is a kind of a pale pastel blue. That's 110 to 129. Then it goes green, yellow, orange, red, and then blah, blah, blah. So right now, as you look at Montana, just look at southwest Montana. The upper Yellowstone today is at 111% of the 30-year average. The Gallatin is at 126. The Madison's at 120, 112. Jefferson's at 135. Bitterroot's not in southwest, but Bitterroot is a popular fishing area. The Bitterroot is at 181% of the 30-year average.
I love that.
And the Smith is one that always seems to be, Smith Judith mussel shell, always one that seems to be a little dry. But not always. But the Smith is at 144%. Flathead 137, Upper Clark's Fork or Lower Clark's Fork 160. All the entire state is in the 110% or better. So some of the eastern part of the state of Montana, which is again dry, the Tongue River is at 189 and the Powder River is 169. So we are going to have a lot of water. Right now, the river flows are low, and I have some guys say, "Oh, you got snow, but look, the rivers are still low." And I said, "Yeah, the rivers are low because they were low last year, and we're still running on those fumes. Runoff has really not started. It hasn't been warm enough. Now, the next few days here it will be. It's going to be into the 70s, upper 70s, and I can guarantee you these rivers are going to go up. The USGS streamflow gauge maps you can look at, they'll be close to vertical. They don't ever go totally vertical, but they'll be closing in towards vertical. So that's where we're at."
Okay. Well, let me ask you, Dave, because you've been at this for a long time, 40 plus years, right? Give us your perspective on how the Madison has changed over the years, and how have the changes affected the fishing, or have they?
Well, I think that changes have affected the fishing experience for sure. And the older you are and the longer term your experience is with the Madison, people in that bracket tend to be disappointed. I frankly have benefited from that personally because it's made my fly shop busier. And but I'm closer to the end of my career. I should be out of the outfitting business in 2023. I'm still going to get a guide license and guide for the new outfitter, and I'll be just like my regular guides. Where's my check? How come I don't have a trip tomorrow? But anyway, the whole thing has changed some, and it's a lot busier. The other factor but in that crowding, if you would, The greatest growth, frankly, has occurred not in the commercial use, which is what the common public angler thinks. The greatest growth has actually occurred in the private sector. There are more public users. And in my little subdivision where I live in Bozeman, the alley behind my house, there are 11 floating craft in that alley, all of them pretty nice. A lot of them nicer than mine, and I'm the lone commercial guy. There's 10 private anglers in this valley and me, and those guys fish a lot. So the public growth has been commercial growth has certainly grown a lot, but the overall growth that's sort of rocketed the growth up has been growth in the public sector. So that's a change.
Okay.
Notwithstanding whirling disease, and we have had some low water. I mean, I'm not going to get into a debate about climate change, but over the millennia and the eons, we've had quite a climate change in this part of the country and around the world. So right now, we've had some warm and low water years. This is not going to be one of them. I can tell you that already. It's been butt cold and very wet, and still is. And we have a few days in the 70s coming up, but you know what? It's going to get cold again and rain. So you normally build snowpack here anyway through June. So anyway, going back to the Madison, the resource is remarkably resilient. I mean, it just amazes me how Mother Nature and the fish and the animals survive through some of these things. But they do. And the Madison trout populations took a pretty good beating with the whirling disease stuff. But
back in the 90s, Dave? When was that?
Yeah, in the 90s.
Okay.
And it killed a lot of the rainbow trout. Up to 80 or 90% of them got whacked there for a while. But the populations have come back, and they're really quite good. There's plenty of fish in the Madison. Fishing pressure has changed, of course, so for some people that's disappointing. If you're a relatively contemporary user who doesn't know any different, it doesn't bother a lot of people. I mean, we kept pretty close track of it in our fishing guide service last year. We did not have one complaint about crowding from our clients, and we run a lot of trips. I'm not the biggest one, but I'm one of the biggest ones. We didn't have that experience. Our clients didn't complain about it. So that part of it, there's plenty of people having plenty of fun. Some of the older folks like me don't like it so much. But so the point is the resources are still in pretty good shape. We have a good water year coming this year. The fish populations, it's anecdotal because I'm just going fishing. I haven't seen data yet, but my fishing experience has been that the fish are they're in good shape physically. I can tell you that because I've handled them, and there seems to be plenty of them. So I think this will be a good year, and then we'll have to see. I mean, the weather is the weather. I mean, they do long-term forecasts. Those are probably not worth the paper they're printed on. The 10-day stuff is pretty good. So I look at snow water equivalents in the 10-day forecast. What's going to happen to snowpack over the next 10 days? Because that's the windows that you look at. And next 10 days, we're going to lose some, but we'll probably build some because it's going to be down into the mid-30s at night, and it's going to rain. So some of that will fall on the upper elevations as snow. Oh, yeah. If you live here long enough, I've been snowed on every month of the year, July and August. So this is more normal. And then the fish populations are fine. Like I said, what is different is the aesthetic experience. And there are some things I think that probably need to be done. There's a Madison River work group now that are they're doing some recreational planning. And the way this current work group, I'm not on this work group committee. I applied for it. I wasn't chosen. At first, I felt bad because I have a lot of experience that is useful, but I wasn't chosen. But my wife was thrilled to death because she didn't want me involved in that. So I still go to the meetings and keep track about what's going on. So almost certainly there's going to be a cap on commercial use beginning in 2023 based on the outfitters who had licenses as of 2020. You'll get to choose from 2019 or 2020 your best year, and that will be the number of trips that you get. New outfitters that weren't licensed are going to have to buy or lease to get their way in. The other gorilla in the room, as I mentioned earlier, the biggest growth use percentage-wise is in the public. Just to give you a quick example, in 79 and 80, I was on Governor Tom Judge's Madison River Study Committee, not unlike this work group. And we had a lot more data. We had census-driven data, not survey, and so we had really good, reliable data. This survey stuff now I question, because surveys are responded to by people who have complaints. But census, you get your butt counted whether you like it or not. So we had census, we had a lot more resources, frankly. So the use back then on the river south of Ennis was 70% commercial, guides and outfitters, and 30% public. Now it's roughly 50-50. So the way the 30 gets to 50, the way the public grows from 30 to 50 is their growth far outpaces the commercial use. So the one thing that's done on other rivers around the country, this isn't the only one, is when use gets controlled or managed, the public and the commercial sector both take a haircut, kind of. And that's what they're struggling with now, is how they're going to do the public. And it's not for sure, but the progression, let's put it this way, the progression in other states on other rivers is the public gets permitted in some fashion. And we do that here already on the Smith. And they do that all over the world. You got to have permits to fish steelhead in BC. A lot of people aren't going to like it. Surprisingly, the reaction that I've had from the public is the people that fish a lot and understand, is they understand. And they're fine. As long as the use gets controlled in some fashion, they're fine. If they've got to pick a permit up, and how they do it is, there's so many nuances to that. I'm not going to begin to talk about what the options are, but I think there's going to be there's going to be a commercial cap for sure. Within the next couple of years, there will be at least a program for permitting the public. And if you want to get the handle on the control, I can tell you this, you could wipe out commercial use, and I'm certainly not advocating that. You could wipe out commercial use, the Madison would still be busy. Yeah. And the way this area is growing, that thing's going to get busier and busier and busier. But eventually, the river will be back to where it is now. It just will be. And so a lot of people say, oh, you cap the guides and outfitters, they're all the problem. That's a person that has no understanding of the problem whatsoever. So that's where it's going. And there are some other things along the way. I think I've told you there's going to be some infrastructure improvements. Some of these access points are so poorly designed. Right. Traffic flow, it takes forever to put in and take out because they're just designed wrong. They weren't done by a transportation engineer. They were done by a parks guy. And so they're redoing that. The governor and the Fish and Game departments put some money aside to start working on Upper Madison FAS to make them smoother and safer. Just as an aside, there was someone who was killed last year pulling out a Windy Point because the Windy Point parking lot was full and people were parking on the road, and that's 75 miles an hour through there. So it's that kind of stuff. So they're going to address that. That's going to help. And then the other thing we're going to implement that I've been involved in the development of I'm going to actually take credit for this. This was my idea originally several years ago, was to get some, what I call river ambassadors, docents, if you would, that just help people. And the guides and outfitters are going to brittle at the fact that they need any help, but some of them do, frankly, especially newer ones. Just what the etiquette is, the boat ramp, whose turn is it, where do you park, all that kind of thing. And so they're going to implement a pilot program on the Upper Madison and probably a couple of 3 access points for maybe 3 months. Well, we've got some young interns that we're going to hire, I think, from the local universities, and they're going to be there not to enforce with no badges, no guns, just helping people out. You can park here, information about what's required for, life jackets, just that kind of thing. And I think the combination of all those things is really going to help, because what you find from the surveys they're doing now is the number one gripe by far from outfitters, guides, commercial users, and the public is congestion at fishing access sites.
Right.
So you'll have a cap on use, and then you'll have these other things.
That's great. All right. So, Dave, I'm really curious. How did you end up in Montana, being from Wisconsin?
Well, it had to do with fishing.
Of course.
I grew up in southern Wisconsin in Janesville and spent the summers of my youth at a cabin in northern Wisconsin. My dad, my grandpa, and some of my grandpa's friends built a cabin on Big Lake near Manitowish Waters in 1950, the year of my birth. I went up there carried around by my mom the summer of 1950, totally unaware of anything around except being a baby. So
Right.
I went up there every summer until I think I was 20. I spent some part of every summer up there. So I developed a big love for fishing. Now that was stillwater stuff. So I was a bass, crappie, bluegill, walleye, smallmouth type guy. I didn't venture much into muskies because they were too much work for a little kid. So, but I did a ton of fishing. They give me the rowboat and a peanut butter sandwich and a bottle of water and say, see you later. And I'd row all over the lake. They didn't let me run a motor until I was 12. And then when I got to run the motor at 12, then I went everywhere around the lake. And I just fished and fished and fished and fished. So I was pretty blessed. I did a ton of fishing. And then I was introduced to stream fishing for trout by my dad, as I mentioned to you earlier about Robinson Creek up by Black River Falls. He also took me and fished some other waters in Wisconsin. And then when I went to school in St. Paul. So I used to run back across the border and fish the rush, the willow, the kinnikinnick. If I had a long weekend and the time, I'd go up and fish the brule. And I was introduced to Montana by a college girlfriend whose family used to spend the summers in Bozeman. And we came out to Montana during a fall break in the summer of 1970. We were given a week-long break from school. I went to McAllister College, and we were supposed to go campaign for the candidates of our choice. And I asked my friends, nobody was really going to campaign much. And so this girlfriend, she said, would you like to go to Montana and look at the places my family goes in the summer? We can fish. So we did. So summer 1970, I came out for a short visit. And of course, being a fisherman, I fell in love with the mountains and the rivers. And this girlfriend and I went our own ways amicably later. We didn't get married, but we went our own ways. And I came back out here. So about 74 was the first year I came to Montana. And I came and I went back to Minnesota and just decided to move. So I moved out here and I had a variety of jobs, and I worked my way around the food and beverage industry because there were a ton of those jobs at Big Sky and in Bozeman, and then worked my way into a job working for an outdoor sporting goods store called the Beaver Pond Sports Specialist, which was outdoors, not team sports. It was fishing, hunting, backpacking, that sort of thing. They had a budding guide service, and I learned how to row a boat. I knew how to row a boat. I just had never done rivers, and so I row a boat just fine. So I picked up the rowing part pretty fast. And I'd been fishing a lot on my own, so I knew some waters. And there frankly wasn't a lot of competition then in the guide world, especially in Bozeman. Most of the developed guide services were in West Yellowstone, Ennis, Livingston, Dan Bailey's. Bozeman really didn't have it. So it was a blessing to me because I was a good fisherman and could handle the boat, but I didn't really know all the nuances of fly fishing for trout. So I kind of got to work my way into it without having to be in a highly competitive situation as it is right now, when there's a ton of guides and all of them starting out know more about the fishing, fly fishing for trout than I did. So I got experience through that, working at that store. And then in 77, I got married. My wife and I had talked about maybe opening our own fly shop. And so we opened a shop in Bozeman, which was called Wild Wings Orvis Shop. So it was an Orvis shop, not a company-owned store. We owned it. And then Wild Wings is a sporting art gallery business. And so we had a sporting art gallery and the fly shop, and that did very well. I mean, we were in Bozeman as the first specialty fly shop. Orvis gave us good advertising, although an Eastern brand kind of, it's still a lot of travel people. And so our shop grew rapidly. We ran a good guide service. I sort of knew what I was doing, but learned as I went. So we had a really good business and no competition for the first few years. And then, of course, The River Runs Through It came, and that just brought
The movie.
a deluge of people into who wanted to discover the beauty in the movie. Some of those people found it and stayed. A lot of them stayed, and this was the classic. The husband stayed, the wife got a divorce and went home to the big city. But it started, it really brought a lot of focus to fly fishing in Montana. And then Bozeman got more competitive. There was a shop opened, I think, 4 years after I started mine. There was another fly shop, specialty shop, and now there's half a dozen at least. I can't think of them all, but we changed our name in the 80s to we dropped out of the Orvis shop program, kept Orvis as a product line, but we became what they call a dealer, and we became Montana Troutfitters. Changed the name. My wife, the logo, if you know our little logo, brown trout with the state of Montana on it, decal kind of thing, that my wife Karen designed, and that's pretty recognizable. I've had people from literally all over the world see it. Some guy said I was in Dublin in a bar and the bartender was wearing a Troutfitters hat.
Oh, that's fun.
So it's a brand and image that's done pretty well for us. And then Bozeman grew, and that helped me. It was a blessing to be in Bozeman, frankly, because the destination town shops, that would be Ennis, West Yellowstone, to some extent Livingston, Gardner, they didn't do any business. A lot of them shut down in the winter. And so we would maintain a pretty good business in the winter, fly time materials, tackle, Orvis gear. So being in a year-round town with a growing population, I didn't have to shut the doors.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the fishing season is such that people can fish, not January so much, but somebody that comes to here in February to ski, they can fish too if they want. So we did a little bit of that. So that's how I got into the fly fishing world.
Yeah. What's been kind of like the hardest part about doing all that for you?
You know, the hardest part, to be honest with you, the business end of things are plenty challenging. Any small business is, but the hardest part is to have a fly shop and also have a family.
Yeah.
You work so many hours in the summer, and I'm not complaining, but everybody does it that does a good, well-run fly shop. And my work week were 80 hours plus.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, it's unforgiving in the summer months. So, and then you got to find time with the family, but we've managed to do that. And my marriage stayed together, and my wife was supportive. She worked in the store for a while. We still did stuff as a family. So that was the toughest thing, was to not let the fly shop consume every waking hour, and my family was put on hold until 1st of November.
Let me ask you this. What are you most proud of after all those years of, well, you've done so much, Dave. I mean, you've been...
Well, I guess I'm proud of I'm firm believer of that proverb, pride goeth before a fall. So I try not to get too proud about stuff, because I had breaks and blessings and mentors. Bud Lilly was a mentor of mine, a competitor, but a fly shop in West Yellowstone, and he and I were friends. He helped me out. So I had a lot of that in my favor. So pretty blessed by all that stuff.
That's awesome. Good for you. And then you've got a son who's a U.S. Army major, correct?
Yeah. And just one quick thing, I think what most proud, really, if I'm proud of something, take some pride in it, is the fact the shop is still there. It's still being run by new owners. And so that thing started in 77 basically, and here we are in 2022. So we're pushing 50 plus years, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of businesses of any kind that can maintain their presence for 50 years. So anyway, I'm proud of that. So my son, my two boys, Christopher, the oldest, is a financial advisor here in Bozeman for Edward Jones. He's a fishing fanatic, the most fanatical fisherman in the family by far. Then I have a younger son, Kevin. Kevin likes to fish, but when he's a very good athlete, and his summers were occupied with sports or preparation for sports. So he didn't fish as much. He fished plenty, but not as much as Christopher. So he's the major. He went to West Point. He graduated from there, did a couple of tours and assignment in the Middle East and returned home from those safely. He's now a major.
Good.
He's stationed in Chicago, and he's part of the Army Enterprise Marketing. So the services have taken over all the recruiting stuff themselves. They don't hire ad agencies. And he's got a MBA in finance and marketing from Duke University, and he's part of the new team.
Way to go, Dad.
Yeah, he's done well. He's done all the work. Do I take some pride? Yeah, but he did the work, and he did a lot of work to get there. So, but he's in Chicago. That's where the main office is. So yeah, he's in the U.S. Army, but he comes out here often. Comes out. He's got, what has he got now? He's got 4 kids, and they all like to fish. Kevin goes fishing a lot wherever they live. The Army guy and the guy who lives in Bozeman, of course, he takes his kids fishing all the time. So fishing's a big family activity for all of us.
Big part of your life. So, all right, we just got a few minutes left, and I'd love it if you could give our listeners kind of an overview of the, kind of walk us through the seasons on a Madison, like what are the major hatches, and then a little bit about, some of your favorite flies.
Sure, you bet. So the Madison season is starting in January. It's a bitter month, not a lot of fishing opportunities, but if there are some where it's warm enough, you don't freeze your gear, you can go out and catch fish on nymphs 365 days, 24/7. So you got nymph fishing. Then towards the end of the month, you start to get enough midge activity, so you'll find some dry fly fishing. You can actually go out and fish midges on the Madison. In February, the water's warming somewhat, so the activity speeds up. The rainbows are getting ready to spawn, so they're active. Midge activity increases dramatically. End of February on the Madison can be really good dry fly fishing. I mean, you can go out and get a lot of fish on dries.
Wow.
March, you start to get a few betas. Nymph fishing is good. The rainbows are in their spawn. You leave those things alone while they're spawning, but you'll still fish and get plenty of rainbows that aren't in the spawn, either males or whatever. So I'm not an advocate for bothering fish when they're on reds, and that some of that's been closed anyway on the Madison. Then May, that's Mother's Day caddis, more nymphing. End of May, the stoneflies start to get active on the Madison. Their hatch crew is generally at Ennis around the 26th, 27th, 28th of June. And then after the golden stones come with those, you have caddis as well. There are some pale morning duns, and then just general attractor pattern fishing. There's some yellow sallies as well. And then it becomes the time of attractors, of chubbies and so on. Then you get into late August and it's hopper time, or August and late August is hopper time. And there's a nocturnal stone, they call them the midnight stones. That's another chubby fly. And all during this time, if you got the conditions, you can always nymph. You can throw streamers when it's not bright and sunny. And then you get back into the fall again. Browns are getting cranked up, so the streamer fish are cranked up for spawning. Streamer fishing's good. And then you get fall betas. And fall betas in the spring is the same way. A lot of times when there's a good dry fly hatch, it's a 2-rod deal for me. I take the fall, I take my 4-weight for throwing betas dries, and I take the streamer rod.
Oh, no kidding.
And for streamers. So you do that. But that's the run through of the full year. I'm a kind of an old school guy on flies. There's a lot of cool patterns, and the fly skews, stock keeping units in the shop are mind boggling to me from what they were when I owned the shop. But, I go with, I like some of the betas patterns, some of the new patterns. I'm big on swinging emergers now for the betas hatch. I've found that to be as effective as fishing the dry, and it's nearly the same thing. And so there are a bunch of different betas emerger patterns. I like one called bat wing. And when it comes to a dry fly, I generally fish just sparkle duns on the betas. Griffith snats pretty much all the time on the midges. In the caddis, there's a zillion of those: Goddards, Hemingways, elk hairs, parachutes. You pick your poison on the caddis. When it gets to the salmon fly stuff, depends on what you want to do. I mean, nymphing is the most productive thing to do with salmon flies. And Pat's rubber legs, Bitch Creeks, Brooks stones, there's so many of them now. Nymphs are always a good thing to fish on that hatch because the fish eat a ton of them, and it's a big form of food. The attraction of the salmon fly, though, is the dry fly part, because it's a big bug. The female is almost 3 inches long, and so that'll bring the biggest fish in the river up. So everybody likes the dry fly. And the dry fly, to me, it better be it's got to be a fly that floats all the time. And the one that I actually like the best is the elk trough pattern called a McSalmon.
Okay.
It's macrame body, elk hair wing, deer hair head. You goop that thing up, and that'll float forever. And I do not like changing flies during the salmon fly hatch to try and find the right one. That's a pattern that I know that works. And so you stick with it, and you find the sections where the fish are on the adults. They're not uniformly up and down the river on the adults. It's sometimes a 500-yard stretch of bank. There are bugs. They've been on the water. Everybody's aware for them. So if you're changing fly patterns to try to find the magic fly, you're missing opportunities. So I like flies that float, and that McSalmon floats like a cork. Then the rest of the summer is the Chernobyls, the chubby Chernobyls, and all kinds of different body colors and flies. They've become one of the standards, and you can throw nymphs below those. Those work for hoppers. Then there's good hopper patterns, and you get around back into the fall and Baetis, it's the same thing. And then when it comes to streamers, there's a lot of interest now in throwing these great big double jointed streamers, and I fish those some, but for the most part, I'm an old school. I fish buggers. The JJs is a conehead JJs. That's not an articulated fly. And the other fly I made a small change to that I really like is a Platte River Special. I just put a cone on them.
Huh.
And that's an old school streamer.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, and I like the old school stuff. Mike Lawson, who's a famous name in fly fishing, he and I compare notes on flies all the time. And we're both in this mode where we kind of fish a lot of old school stuff. And we catch a ton of fish between the two of us on just old schools, light and dark spruce, the Platte River Specials, elk hair caddis, Adams, not parachutes, but Adams, stuff that isn't popular now, but the fish still eat. It's so anyway, I kind of gravitate to those, but that's kind of a quick run through on fly pattern.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love it if you could snap a couple pictures of your favorite patterns, maybe some of the ones that aren't as well known, and we'd love to put those out on the Destination Angler Facebook and Instagram pages if you're up for that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'll send you some more. there's the one of the McSalmon in that group. So
you did? Okay.
I'll get you some more.
All right, very good. I got one more thing I want to ask you about, and that's really just how technical can the Madison be, and what are the top anglers doing that really sets them apart?
Well, the Madison can be plenty technical. If it's the fall and they're feeding on Baetis in some pool, I mean, they can be 6X fishermen, or 6X fish, I'll call them. The same's true in the winter. If you're fishing winter, early spring with size 18 or 20 Griffiths gnats, you've got to get a good drift and you've got to put it in the right place. They're not going to swim any great distance to eat that. So it's got that combination of technical with fast water riffle fishing where they don't get a really good look at it. Technical expertise is not as important. And sometimes, frankly, on a chubby, you get a beginning angler who can't get a dead drift to save his butt, is dragging his fly down the river, and the fish crush it. Movement in a hopper and movement in that nocturnal stone, the one that runs along the water, that's normal behavior. So hoppers move and those nocturnals move, so you can strip a chubby and they'll hit it. So the technical fishing is available, but the Madison really doesn't require a high skill level a lot of times to catch fish. It does in some instances, but not like the tailwaters, not like the Missouri Tricos or the Bighorn Black Caddis or some of those spring creeks like the Paradise Valley creeks that if you can't cast and get a good drag-free float in those, you're going to have a hard time catching fish. The Madison is more forgiving. And what's happened in the Madison is, this gets to be a really long story, but the Madison approach has changed a good deal from when I first started. It used to be royal wolves, royal trudes, and now there's a lot more nymph fishing done, and you see a lot of small patterns, small caddis nymphs, midge larvae, zebra midges, and a lot more bobbers. There's still people fishing dries, but if you go to the access points on the Madison now, you see lots of strike indicators, lots of small nymphs.
Okay.
And they still use some stonefly nymphs because the Madison's got a ton of stones. So those Pat's rubber legs have been kind of the de facto stonefly nymph and golden nymph, but probably the professional guide anglers are probably fishing a lot more nymphs on a year-round basis than we did, because we used to get, when your folks came out, you could go down the Madison River with an elk hair caddis and a royal trout and fish down the middle of the river and catch all that 14, 15, 16-inch rainbows you wanted. And that's not the case anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Dave. Let me ask you this question. What's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation about the Madison?
Well, the Madison, despite some of this bad publicity that it's been getting, which is unfounded, frankly, it's mostly being written by people that don't know what they're talking about. I'll be blunt. So it's still a great river. Aesthetically, it's still a great experience. Nothing's changed in the scenery. It's still one of the most beautiful places on God's green earth. And if you are troubled by crowds, change your use patterns. I mean, it's human nature not to want to move your cheese. Everybody wants it in the same place, the same way it's always been. And you and I have had this discussion sort of ad nauseum. But for my personal use and for clients who are willing, I'm an early morning guy, and I'm talking about salmon fly hatch. I'm at the river by 6, and I can tell you that 50% of the guide staff in the world is still in bed at 6 o'clock.
I was going to say, it's hard to find a guide that'll get up early, I've found.
Or at the very least, they're at the grocery store picking up their lunches. So they're an hour and a half, 2 hours behind me. And that's what I do. And I get a river that's largely open, very few people. I've got stuff I recorded, empty launch sites at a salmon fly hatch location at the peak of the hatch, where I'm the only car in the launch site, in the FAS. So there's ways to do that. Those pictures I sent, the ones that are of the moose,
yeah,
those moose are standing in a stream in a side channel of the Madison above 8 Mile, and those fish and those moose are there. And that was at about 7 o'clock in the morning. We were the first ones down through there, so they were out there feeding in the middle of that side channel. We had to wait for them to get out of the way, and the reason we waited, his mother was nearby, and you could see her. If we'd have floated down upon those 2 young moose, we'd have got big trouble with Mom, and she was in a position where she could have thumped us. They're very aggressive. So anyway, the point is, you get to see stuff like that. You still get good fishing, and not many people are going to do this, so I can throw that information out, because most people on vacation do not want to get up at 4 o'clock. But when you do that trip, then you're home by 1. You can take a nap in the afternoon and then go out for dinner. So I just tell people, change your use patterns, your access points if it's available. Put another half hour on your walk before you start. On some rivers, that doesn't necessarily get you away from all the stuff, but in most of them it does. It gets you, at least amongst wading anglers, it'll get you. Most people don't walk that far.
Yeah, good tips, Dave.
So that's what I do, and that river of yesteryear, of yore, whatever the term is, it's still there, and people who want to find it can find it. If you go at the popular times and places at a busy time, popular time of year, there are going to be people there. But honestly, moving your departure time to earlier, and I have a friend in Ennis, John Way, at the tackle shop. He goes the other way. He goes in the evenings. So he has people eat lunch before they come to work. He brings food for dinner, and they fish till dusk. Which out here, that's 9:30 at night. So they get a full day fishing, and they fish the other end. And I can tell you, by that time of the day, there'll be a few vehicles around, but everybody else is gone. I mean, at that end of the day, you got the river to yourself all the way down to the takeout mostly. Same's true of the morning.
Right.
So that's something people can do. And there's ways to do it. It's still a wonderful experience, beautiful place, good fishing.
Okay, one last question. What are your favorite angler-friendly spots for the hungry, thirsty angler after a day on the water?
Oh, I mean for food and beverage, entertainment, adult entertainment?
Food and beverage. Yeah, I always ask that question.
It changes. Well, you're talking to Madison. So I'm driving back to Bozeman from the upper Madison all the time. So there are some, I don't want to slight anybody here, because there's some wonderful places to eat and drink in Ennis proper on the main street. And they're all fun, and they're all loaded with anglers. And that list is long. But the place I go, because I'm headed home, is the McAllister Inn at McAllister, which is out on the shores essentially of Ennis Lake. So it's about 5 miles north of Ennis.
Okay.
And my friends in Ennis, forgive me, please. I love your town. I spend plenty of times there, but I go to McAllister because it's on the way home and I can park my boat in the parking lot. So that's where I go.
Okay, very good.
Great steaks, friendly people, wonderful restaurant.
Can't beat it. Dave, thanks for being on the show, and thanks for all the work you've done over the years to make fly fishing a better experience for everyone.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said many times, I've been blessed to be here and take advantage of all this and made it through so far in relatively good health, raised my family here. So I feel very fortunate, and I've enjoyed being on the show, Steve.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, they can get in touch with me if they're looking at guide trips, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm still the outfitter for the shop, and I'm retired, so I'm really not taking guide trips myself. But I still am the outfitter for Montana Troutfitters, so it's troutfitters.com for the website. All the information is there, and that's the way to get to me, because I honestly am not part of the booking process any longer. I get plenty of calls, but I refer them to the shop, and I'm available if somebody absolutely had something they wanted to talk to me about, and the shop can give out my information for somebody like that. I'm glad to do that. I just am not hanging out a shingle for myself anymore. It's Montana Troutfitters and Bozeman at troutfitters.com.
We'll find you. All right, very good. Well, Dave, I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow. And folks, thanks for listening. You can email me or DM me with comments and suggestions at seg50@gmail.com. And we'll be sure to post Troutfitters Fly Shop contact info in the Destination Angler show notes and pictures of Dave's top fly picks and some other great photos he sent me on our Instagram and Facebook pages. Hey, if you like the show, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.